Well, again, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening and to address the NC State community, College of Engineering. I've got to tell you that NC State has become my favorite new university. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that two of my employees here tonight made me say that. But the truth is, I got connected with NC State about a year ago when I joined RPath, and when I actually met by happenstance one of the professors here, Professor Annie Anton, who was on a flight to Boston, because I actually commute back and forth between Raleigh and Boston. And she was going up to give a talk to Harvard University. And I thought, based on the topic she had mentioned, that this would be really fascinating, and I'd love to learn more about what she was doing at Harvard University. And she abruptly cut me off because she said, I don't want to talk about Harvard University. What I would love to talk to you about is NC State. And I can tell you she is extremely passionate, as is the faculty and staff here at NC State, about the product that they are producing here at the college. And I can tell you in the last year that I have been associated with the product or the people from NC State, I'm extremely impressed. Because RPath, the company, was actually founded by one of the NC State graduates a number of years ago. And he also was one of the early engineers and one of the early founders of Red Hat, who has written some very impressive technology over the years that, as we discussed today, really do solve some real-world problems and have helped companies like Red Hat and have helped companies like RPath really take a core invention, a core technology, and apply that to some real-world business problems. And as a result, you can see, especially if you look at Red Hat today and what they've been able to become, and a large part of that was on some of the invention that came right here out of NC State. So I'm pleased again to be here. But how many of you are here really just for the credits? Liars! Come on. You two, I told you that, I told you that you'd get a free hall pass if you came to this presentation, right? All right. So look, what I want to do today is talk about a little bit about the how you grow and build and scale an enterprise technology business. But it might be surprising to you that I'm not going to talk to you so much about the science of that or the tactics that you go through. I'm going to talk more about the art, because what I do believe is that it is more about the art of why one company can be more successful than it is the science. And I don't mean by saying that one company has a better technology than the other. I mean all things being equal. If you have access to the same knowledge, the same steps on how to build a business, you have the same market timing, you have the same availability to capital, all of that being equal, why does one company, why does one individual succeed over the other? Fascinating premise, and it's something that experts have studied for an awfully long time. There's a lot of theories behind that. I have mine, and that's what I'm going to share with you, because in the 23 years of my experience, I have seen a lot of technology and a lot of technology evolution. But before I get there and get into any depth, I do want to do one quick commercial for RPath. We are in the business of creating software that will help mid-sized to large companies do a much more efficient job of packaging and delivering entire systems, whether that be in physical environments today, whether that be in virtual environments or in cloud environments. And because the folks here at NC State are a little bit familiar with the history of RPath, you might know that the company was founded as a virtual appliance company, taking a core technology, an underlying technology, to allow customers to efficiently build a self-contained system that includes the application, the operating system, all of the middleware, all of the components it takes to run a system, regardless of where that system is running. From there, what we have done, and I'll get into later, is a little bit more involved than that. And we've taken some of that core technology and that core invention, and we've reinvented the company, as was alluded to solve more of a real-world problem, a problem that exists today, while at the same time, we bridge that gap between looking to the future and still being visionary and being able to solve problems that we anticipate down the line. So to that end, what I want to offer to you today, and I know it's probably too late, but if there are any students out here, graduate or undergraduate, that want an opportunity this summer to do one of many different things. The first, come join our engineering department for the summer. We'll be happy to give you some exposure to some real neat technology and some really cool people doing some interesting things. So if you don't have an internship lined up, you want to do some things, we want to have you in the company. So that's why I've actually got my direct phone number there and my email address. Call me. My assistant will talk to you and get it set up. But beyond just working in engineering, we have positions in product management, in product marketing, in inside sales, and even if you consider yourself a technologist, this is the best part, that we have positions that will allow students to come in and just shadow the executives for the entire summer. Sit in meetings, hear discussions, whether they be about technology, whether they be about go-to-market. You will have exposure to a lot more than you're going to get tonight, which is a very high-level view in now 45 minutes of what I can share with you over 23 years. But that real-world experience and listening to proprietary information, heated discussions about things of how to scale ourselves to the next level, debate, and the process that we go through can be fascinating. So if you've got the time and you want to participate, please give us a call. So to put all of my comments tonight into perspective, I thought I would give you a little history. I thought about this as I looked at the slide earlier today and said, why am I putting my age up there? All it proves is I'm old. But what I do want to point out is that over the last 23 years, I've seen a lot of evolution in technology. And I see some faces around here that are close to my age, maybe a little bit older. You've seen a lot of evolution in technology. And part of that experience that I've gained over the last 23 years, including, to a great degree, my Navy experience, has really helped me do a better job as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, and as a participant of the team in building and scaling business. And it is the multitude of experiences that I think is part of the art which can make one individual or one company or a team of individuals that make up a company more successful than the others. And so part of what I'm going to encourage you is to learn an awful lot about a lot of different business as you go. And I'll talk about that in a minute to put that into perspective. But I've been with 7 high-tech companies in 23 years. I've been involved in everything from thin film photoconductors back 15 years ago that today, well, back then, this really dates me, that, do you know, copiers actually didn't use digital technology. They actually used a film belt to transfer images. For some of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, trust me on that, it sucked. It was terrible. But involved in thin film photo technology today, that same technology that was invented is now being applied to things like being able to put high-fidelity audio systems into glass, into plastic, into screens. Imagine in a few years when you buy your car, you're not going to worry about that Bose system that comes from Ford Motor Company. I know we have an ex-Ford Motor Company exec here somewhere in the audience too. But instead, that whole system is going to be embedded within the glass of the car. So I've seen that. I have been in 2 public companies, 5 private companies. All have had an exit to a degree, meaning that the investors got a return on investment either through being acquired or going public, and just 2 companies that you probably have never heard about. One company called Technosis, which was founded out of Belgium, grew from about 0 to 100 million in 2 years, and they did it on a technology that really did solve a real-world problem. And for the computer science students here today, it probably means nothing again to you. But can you imagine the day when you were trying to write an application, and for every database that you had to connect that application to, you had to write separate code. You had to rewrite the application for every individual database. And by the way, some of the databases that you use today didn't exist either. So what Technosis did was they came up with a very clever way and said, boy, I think people could get a lot more advantage out of using software, out of their applications. Companies could do more, productivity could be better if we didn't spend so much time having to write our applications to single databases. So today what you hear about ODBC or JDBC, those kind of concepts came out of Technosis many, many years ago. This was me 2 years ago. Don't even know, I know. This is what startups do to you. This is what being an entrepreneur does. And anybody seen that age progression software out that you can go and you can see it like at the museum down there? So I actually ran my picture yesterday through this age progression software. And the nice new features of that software, you can put in and ask, what will I look like depending on how many new ventures I get involved with? Sadly, I put only one more venture, and this is what I'll look like in 2 years. And then, now this guy isn't a handsome fellow, but the age progression is pretty scary. So my point here is it is taxing, it's draining, but it's exciting at the same time. So let's get into what makes up the anatomy of the entrepreneur. And I really think it's just three things. The successful entrepreneur has three things. You have the knowledge, you've got the passion. You want to see this technology applied to real-world situations, to solving problems, to advancing mankind. There's a number of reasons, but you've got that passion, and you've got the fire. One of the saddest reasons why one entrepreneur fails and why one company fails is somewhere down the line they lose that fire. They just lose that fire. And it sounds simple, but without that, everything fails. And I'm going to get more into that. So what is the frustration? All things being equal, as I laid out, you've got access to money, you've got the knowledge, you've got the passion, you've got the fire, you've got the technology. Why is it so frustrating to bridge that gap between the idea and the execution, the inspiration, and the reality of what it takes to start up and scale a business? If it were easy, every one of these companies first time out would be successful. But it's not easy. So today, what I'm going to talk about in the next 25 minutes or so is more to the point of the presentation. There is part one, which is the science of building a technology business. And that science takes you through normal steps that everybody has access to. Again, you could take a whole course on this, get books and tapes, search the internet. There's a plethora of information for you to have access to. And they'll tell you some variation of these steps. I have to validate my vision. Okay, that's great, but how do I do it? I kind of know that. I have to build a differentiated product. Well, to what degree? What kind of an incremental change do I have to make an impact and to make it successful? And remember, as we talk, success is a degree of measurement. If I set out to build a company and I wanted to sell 3 units of this product over the next year, that might not be that difficult to do. If I start a technology startup company and I want to sell 30,000 in my first year, that might be a little bit more difficult depending on what the problem and depending on what the technology is. So we'll talk about that. Partner early with customers. How do I really do that? Another tactical step. And then negotiating venture funding. At what stage should I do that? And why will they listen to me? And then ultimately to scale beyond that initial invention and to get those initial customers to buy off on your product or service, how do I attract a world-class team to take it to the next level? Because I will contend it takes a world-class team. But with all of that, and all of that information you can find, what I believe makes the difference than just discussing those tactical scientific steps of building a business is the art. And I have lived off the art of building the business versus the science of building the business. So the lessons that I want to share with you today relate to the art. We'll intertwine some concepts about how to tactically build the business, but I'm going to focus more on these topics. Always be the dumbest guy in the room. And I know for me here, looking at this crowd, it's not a stretch for me tonight at NC State. But we'll talk about the lesson I learned and why that is so important, especially as a technologist, when you're starting to build your company and try and get people to listen to you. I've already alluded to, you need to learn a little about a lot. And what that means is you need to learn more about what your customers want to buy and what their business model is, not just what the geeks want to do in talking to each other about solving a cool technological problem. Every customer in any company I have been in, the sales cycle moves faster. They believe more in your people. They believe more in your solution when you fully understand what their business problem is. A lot of people forget that. We insist, and I insist in any of the companies that I participate in, that we fully understand what the business problem they're trying to solve, and then what the impact, and more importantly, the economic impact is to that business. And when you can do that, you can do a much better job of scaling those first customers, and then from there, it hopefully will snowball and get to the concept of the tipping point. Best ideas often suck. That's all I got to say about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Solve real-world problems. I have learned more times than not that we come out and we try to think more about how cool the technology is and think about a way to apply our technology then to a problem that may be big, it may be small, it may not be important at all. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Surround yourself with motivated people. I'm going to talk about that. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. You must have the ability to do that. You, technologist, entrepreneur, you have to be your best salesperson in the company. No question about it. You don't leave it to the sales guys, the marketing guys, the hired guns, because you think you want to be in that back room just contributing to the technology. I can tell you with confidence, every employee at OurPath could get up today and articulate very clearly our vision, our message to the market, our value proposition. Every single employee can do that. I'm confident. You have to be able to do that as well. Accept as much money as you can. It is not a bad thing. Uncle Harry wants to give you 100 grand to get the, take it. Fidelity Investments want to give you money? Absolutely, take it from them. Venture capital, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And above all else, achieve the objective. It's a statement I use in every company, and it's a lesson I learned from a gentleman by the name of Wallace Coulter, and I'm going to get into him in just a second. And then I believe ultimately that there really is only one difference that makes the one entrepreneur more successful than the other, or sometimes what I call the difference between the entrepreneur and the wishapreneur. We all have fantasies. We all think about growing that billion-dollar company, getting that exit, buying the plane, living on the yachts, or even better yet, having that face and that name associated with that product and technology. I'm the guy that built it. But how do you separate yourself from just wishing that stuff happens to actually executing and make it happen? So some of the things you got to ask yourself: do I fail well? Do I sell well? If I'm going to have partners in this business, what will they contribute? Don't just surround yourself with family members that think your stuff is cool and it's great. Am I a good communicator? Can I simplify things? Can I take my technology, my invention, my product, my algorithm, and put it really into layman's terms that can be directly associated with a business problem that needs to be solved? And am I good on the emotional roller coaster? I can tell you, I came today, I was in 2 days of sales meetings at OurPath. I had a board meeting in the afternoon. One of those meetings I was high as a kite, getting some deals. Next meeting I was dragged down. It can happen on a daily basis, not even on a monthly or weekly basis. Can you manage through that? If you can't, go do something else. These are core fundamentals that you have to train your mentality to be able to survive building these startups. It's not easy. So what does it take? It takes just a good idea followed by a lot of people, right? We all know that can't be further from the truth. Building a startup company is really tough, and it often can take longer than you think. So you've got to think out your business well. You have to have the ability to successfully launch and continue to deliver on that technology. Oftentimes it's about making incremental improvements along the way. One of the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs make, and I can tell you even people in my own company, not you, Elliot. Oh, I said I wouldn't say your name, sorry about that. Make the mistake that I've got to have the whole thing done. To go to market and to prove my concept, I have to have it from idea to completed product, and it's got to be perfect. Not true. Now, my comment isn't around quality. Quality we always want to have, but a complete product may not have every single feature that is in that you think needs to be, or that the market wants right out of the gate. The market will ask for everything. The best example is the iPad, to me. The iPad doesn't have that much functionality. It's kind of crazy to me, even as a business guy looking at this, at how many geeks are loving this thing. And there's reasons why I love it, don't get me wrong. But they self-admitted at Apple that it is coming out with features that aren't going to be available in version 1 that you would think today, just based on iPhone technology, should be in that product. But why are they successful with it? Why are people camping in tents the night before to get their hands on what they already know version 2 is going to be a heck of a lot better? We can talk about that. You need to have a lot of courage to focus, but be willing to adjust, and you need lots of help. Part of what I always talk about is there are no self-made millionaires. The CEO of any of these companies, large or small, didn't make it on their own. It wasn't the poor kid growing up in the Bronx, New York, that was so disadvantaged, and he rose above everything else, and he became successful on his own. It's not true. It never happens. You need a team. You need people. You need collaborative knowledge to help you get there. One of the things I did enjoy about the Red Hat talk earlier this year when Jim Whitehurst spoke was their whole concept about the user collaboration, the user community, helping to build better technology through open source, and that's really what their company's built on. I believe that premise is absolutely true, that we can do more because more people participate and contribute than we can on our own. So we're going to talk about that. And again, I'm going to try to intermingle some of the tactical steps with some of these concepts. My first job out of college was working for what had become the largest biomedical equipment manufacturer, medical manufacturer in the world. Privately held Coulter Electronics. Anybody familiar with that company? Okay, one person, good. 2 people, excellent. The whole idea behind Coulter Electronics was it is unsafe, it is timely, it is error-prone to be able to test blood cells on a slide and look at them under a microscope. And I had the very fortunate advantage of going to work for Coulter Electronics and meeting and sitting and talking with the inventor of the technology that grew to be over $1 billion in revenue, privately held by Wallace Coulter, who had 2 ideas, and that was, how do I apply my passion for engineering and solving real-world problems and make sure it had an impact on the world? And when I sat with Wallace Coulter, it was actually quite embarrassing. I actually looked geeky at one time, had the long hair and the glasses, and loved the technology, and I sat down in the cafeteria where 5,000 other employees would sit, and by total happenstance, Wallace came and he sat across from me with his fishing hat, just like that. He never wore a tie. They must have photoshopped that in. He was a real casual, super nice guy, real down to earth. And he never said much. And all he said to me at that table that day was, "Mike, take off your glasses." I said, "Why, Mr. Coulter?" He said, "Because you look too smart. And one thing I'm going to tell you right off, always be the dumbest guy in the room. If people think you have all the answers, they don't want to do business with you. I've invented something that I surrounded myself with great people and ran my technology and passion through a lot of different minds. But what I did was I asked questions. And for 20 years, I asked questions about what the problem was with automating blood cell counting. And he grew that business to $1 billion because he said, I'm going to ask more questions than I'm going to give answers. And it sounds, again, simple. But he took a technology and he figured out, which was the other part of the lesson that I wanted to learn, which was how, by asking a lot of questions, being the dumbest person in the room, even in this case where he was probably one of the smartest, he won the same awards that Madame Curie won, that Thomas Edison won, for invention and technology. You would never know it. He drove an Oldsmobile Cutlass with his brother and shared a house in Hialeah, Florida with his brother, and they were both combined worth probably $700 or $800 million each at the time I met them in the early 80s. But what it taught me also was that is the only way to validate a vision, is to listen, not to go out with so many preconceived notions and presumptions of what you think the market might want. Shortcut all that stuff and save yourself a lot of aggravation. And ask the market themselves. They'll tell you. So he took a big idea, very big idea, and made it simple. It's also what I learned from Wallace Coulter was how daunting would it sound if I came in to a venture capital community, or if I came into people here at NC State and said, I want us to get together because in 5 years we are going to have the world's largest privately held medical manufacturing company where 80% will have 80% market share, and on $1 billion in revenue will generate $300 million in profit. You'd laugh me out of the room. Or maybe you wouldn't. Because that's what Wallace Coulter did. But then what did he do, which was even better? He broke it down. And he broke the problem down. And while that's his vision, he said, now I've got to think about how do I start to deliver that? The earlier concept, you don't have to have the complete product ready. He started to automate and change just some of those things that he wanted to do. How do I make it safer? How do I then automate it? How do I then get samples where I can get up to 6,000 samples in 20 minutes tested across the world in labs and in physicians' offices? And that grew from where the technology is today. By the way, it was acquired ultimately as Wallace Coulter got older, and it was acquired by Beckman. He did not want to let it go, but he was 90 years old. And he just couldn't do it anymore, and finally gave up the company. Today, you can take an instrument like this, and while it's such a simple problem, the technology was used to, or the complex technology was still used to solve a simple problem. Now this device itself can test endless amount of samples and give you more data than the original Coulter counter gave you in their entire system. Lesson number 2, learn a little bit about a lot. I mentioned that earlier. I have spent a good amount of time learning about companies like this, that today all of them are my customers. I didn't know they were going to be my customers. And let me take you way back. Prior to those 7 companies and the 2 public companies, I stocked shelves at Toys R Us. I packed trucks at UPS. I worked in the medical field. I knew about competitors like Baxter. I worked for the Boston Globe in corporate, all during high school and prior to graduating college. And what did that help me with later on was understanding a little bit of their operation and their business model. Now, I'm not suggesting you have to go out there and go work for all these companies, and you're a little older than I was when I started doing all that, but try to think about every business you interact with. Don't just think about the technology. Think about what the business problem is. Think about what they are doing as a business. That will help you think about how does my technology apply and how can I better their model. The best ideas often suck. It's so true. Better technology does not always come out on top. Good enough to solve the problem always wins. Back again, that even sometimes an incremental change can be better. Remember that buyers are emotional. Those first customers that you're trying to find are emotional. My example of the iPad, that is an emotional purchase. Hey, 2001 and 2003, I think Microsoft came out and relaunched the tablet, the computer that was going to change the way everybody did computing. One problem with that is not everybody's ready to do it. Heck, there are still mainframes hanging around. So you've got to be able to think about what the consumer, how much of a leap they're really willing to take. So the iPad example is just proof that by giving small incremental changes, it can make a big difference. Now, I love this one. Anybody ride motorcycles here? All right, I did. Well, wait a minute. Yes, I did know that. Anybody else know how to ride a motorcycle? All right, don't do it. It is unsafe. There are two types of motorcycle riders, those that have been in accidents and those that will. At least that's what my ex-wife used to tell me as she used to cut me off down the road. But anyway, it's funny because I think about technology even on the consumer side. And I think about Harley-Davidson. Now, Harley-Davidson owners know something. And this is the quote you'll often hear them saying, you can buy better, but you can't pay more. I can tell you there is technology in Suzuki, in Honda, in other products that is so far superior, but why does Harley-Davidson sell more motorcycles, especially here in the US, by far than anybody else? And why does the average guy or gal that rides a Harley-Davidson are willing to pay thousands of dollars more for the accessories that go on those bikes? Because it's emotional. Technology, even applied to computer software, believe it or not, it's emotional. We are engaged in sales cycles at our path right now. I can't tell you how much by appealing to the emotion of the buyer, regardless of the technological solution, we win those deals 2-to-1 over the ones that, that we don't, that we go on a pure technology sale. Solve a real-world problem. And a term we use within our path is anecdata. I don't like anecdata. I came in our path a year ago, and I said, Mike, so glad you're coming in here. We have got the coolest thing in the world. We are going to change the way we manage systems, and the whole IT world is going to love it. This thing's going to take off so quickly. I said, really? Why? Well, because we know this, we know this, we know this. Well, where did you learn this, that, and that? What do you mean, where did we learn it? I think we read that somewhere on the internet. Oh, there we go. $25 million later, and you wonder why you just have a couple of customers. So it's one of the biggest problems. It sounds simple, but we start to convince ourselves that because we saw it somewhere somebody else is doing it, that we should do it too. I rode on a snowmobile a couple of years ago with a guy in high technology, and we're out in Colorado taking a few days off, and we're riding around, and he knew the terrain very well. Next thing I saw was this path, and it looked really cool. And I said, wow, hey, why don't we go that way? He goes, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Why do you want to go that way? Because there's tracks, it looks good. He said, the last two people that took that path died. You don't know what's on the other side of that. That's a 600-foot cliff. So it looked good at first. If you follow your instincts and just say, hey, because it looks good, I'll do it, or because people think it sounds good, we'll build it, you could fall off that cliff and fall off that cliff real quickly. So part of what we did at our path was made that transition from thinking more about what would be cool to what, in fact, the market really is telling us that they want. No more relying on that anecdata, relying on real customer feedback. More than anything, it's all about distribution. One of the lessons I learned is that we get through building our technology, we validate our marketplace, and we totally forget about how are we going to sell this stuff? Because I thought if people built it, they'll just come buy it. Isn't that the way it works? Hey, if it's cool enough, people will do it. You've got to think about distribution all day long. If you don't think that Apple thinks about distribution, oh, you've got it wrong. You don't think Microsoft thought about distribution or continues to think about distribution? Now, they've got an advantage over us. They're huge corporations. But they thought about that early on, believe me. And they continue to think about that. I put on the slide here, open source is a double-edged sword. I mentioned earlier about Red Hat. And while I believe open source is absolutely a great way to add contribution to the community and to build bigger and better things, stand by that. It's also a double-edged sword if you're thinking about it from a distribution model. I can tell you, I know some companies have been talking to their CEOs this week. They've got 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 customers that they built up over the last 17 years, and they're doing 1.3 million in revenue. Oh, jeez. Who wants to do that? Now, part of what they had thought about was, if I can give away something for free, that's good. I can build a user community, and there's nothing wrong with that. Part of the problem that they didn't think about when they thought about distribution after the fact was, if I give it all away for free, what do I have to sell? It's a little different model from the Red Hat folks, of course, but in this case, they didn't think it through. And if you don't think that through, you're going to get caught where this company is, and now RPath is saying, well, hey, we'll take advantage of those 10,000 customers because we have something to sell your customers, and they want to buy that. So it's all about distribution, and don't forget that as you're thinking about even at the earliest stages of building your business. Which leads to lesson 4A, which is don't overthink your business. I had a session at RPath the other day, brought in the executive team, and I said, again, let me lay out for you what the big vision is here. I want this done not in 2011, not in 2012. I want to be the systems management company with a complete product that makes it easier, cheaper, faster, and more interesting way of delivering and packaging it, and I want it at the end of the year. Let me tell you what's going to work, Mike. Jeez, whoa. You can start to think to yourself right out of the gate why things won't work. And now my new mode and what I learned early on is we know there are going to be reasons why things won't work. Start off by thinking about why they will. What do we have to do to make it work? I'm getting a little bit behind, but I just love some of these stories. If you think about engineering challenges, one of the best was Apollo 13. Most of you only saw the movie years later. I'm even too young to remember that without seeing the highlight reels, but you've got a spacecraft, billions of dollars, it's up there, it's running out of oxygen, it's got no electrical power, and they're out floating in the middle of space, and that's where the famous saying, Houston, we have a problem, comes in, and they called back to Houston and said, we have a problem. Well, they had a big problem. That engineering team at NASA, which only had days to figure out which was the impossible, came up with the impossible, and we all know the story. They successfully engineer a way using existing components, existing technology to get there and to get them back safely. So I challenge our team, I challenge yourself when you think of your own business, start to think positive. Think about what will make it successful. Experiment with the business model. There is nothing wrong with saying we tried it this way today, we ran into these issues, let's shift our thinking, let's change our business model. Which talks about obstacles. Henry Ford, one of the best quotes I ever continue to think about on this theme is obstacles are those frightening things that you see when you take your eye off the goal. If you've got a goal and you've got a passion, you've got that vision, you've got the capability, don't let the obstacles get in your way. Build a differentiated product. Some people don't like Dean Kamen. Some think he's a nut. He's a whacked out inventor. I love Dean Kamen. He thinks big. 20 years ago, we got on 60 Minutes, and he said, I've got an invention that's going to change the world. People are like, whoa, that's great. Everybody's getting geared up for months about what is this thing. And what his vision was, hey, I want to change the way personal transportation is made. I've invented other things over time, but I think this is a world-changing product. It wasn't good enough, and I still contend today it's not good enough to just try to set out as your vision to do incremental changes. Have the vision big, and then set your plan for making those incremental changes as you go. Dean Kamen has done that. He continues to do it. I think we're going to actually see a lot more, and there's some very sophisticated technology in those simple concepts. And today, and he's going to get there, will change the way transportation and personal transportation is coming, because he started with a very lofty goal, and he came out with a differentiated product and had the guts to follow it up. Other differentiated products more related to some of the things we're talking about. The companies I talked about, Technosis and Swan International, talked a little bit about Technosis and the concept of writing one application once that could connect to multiple databases. Simple concept. Reason why it grew from 0 to 100 million that quickly, because it was a much needed invention in that community. The market wanted that. Facebook is another example. You're all familiar with that. Here's a case of not thinking through so much what the business model was going to be. I will concede. And I put it in as an example because sometimes, and I'm not going to say the blind squirrel got a nut in this case, it turned out that people started to really embrace social media and the concept of some college kids at Harvard University thinking about how do I know more people on my dorm floor and how do I get to interact with them better. I'll come up with a software application that does that. But it's still a very differentiated product, and to date, and taking it to the next level, larger companies that acquired the Facebooks understand that there's a lot of potential there, and they did build a heck of a user community. So there is absolutely something to be said for if you can differentiate your product, you can validate a vision within that marketplace, and you can get users knowing how then you're going to get revenue out of those users, then things like Facebook, things like what Red Hat did can really pay off down the line. One that I love, and I'll just point out, I was talking to some folks earlier, is a company called Groupon. You take a simple technology of matching consumer needs with the ability, or in this case, the inability of the consumer to afford the kind of things they want. What if I told you, and you've always wanted to be a helicopter pilot, right? You told me that earlier. I'm just making that up. But let's assume you did. You want to be a helicopter pilot, and you don't want to spend $336 a lesson. You're not even sure you're going to like it. If I'm the guy giving the helicopter lessons, I want to get you, because in this economy, not too many people are spending $336 to get a helicopter lesson. So what if there's a way to use technology, and there's a way to get everybody in this room to only pay $30 instead of $300 to get that helicopter lesson? How many of you might try it for $30? Right. How many are going to try it for $300? Only me, because I ride motorcycles. But that's the point. So what Groupon has done is they have taken and married the concept of grouping people and making things affordable. If you go to Groupon.com later when you're in a dorm room or you're at home in your apartment, your house, take a look and just go to Groupon. It will immediately look up your IP address. It will know you're here in the Raleigh area, and it will give you what the Groupon values are of the day. And you can get those deals, and by putting in your credit card and signing up for $5 for this or $30 for that, or a group of theater tickets that would normally cost you $80 for 20 of these things, I'll give them to you for $15. And depending on the level and the amount of people that buy into that, the deal goes through, and you go on. Simple, simple technology, the application of taking some basic algorithms, putting in roughly about $100,000 worth of servers, and having a CTO that understands how to make that efficient, and a technology that makes that efficient. This year, they're projected to have gone from $30 million last year in revenue to over $100 million by the end of this year. And they're doing it with 15 people and $100 grand worth of equipment. They're going to be expanding from 40 states to 80 states. It's amazing. Now, what the heck does this have to do with anything? They should be paying me for this endorsement, right? But it goes to show you about still taking a simple idea, validating a market, getting users, and then they've got a faithful 2 million subscribers, of which I'm one, that look every day for the deal, because who doesn't want a deal? And how great it is for the economy right now. Which also leads me to an unwritten lesson that I've learned is never use timing as an excuse. Can't stand it. I came into RPath, things changed. I never use an excuse that my competitor beat me because they did it at an earlier time than I did. You have to improvise, adapt, overcome, adjust your product thinking, your go-to-market message. How do I reach those customers? How do I get 2 million users? How do I get people in a good economy, bad economy, or anywhere in between to need and want to use my service? Lesson 5, surround yourself with motivated people. It says it all. I will only work with a team of people that will come in every day and put in as much effort as I will from 7:30 in the morning until 6 at night. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have a balance in life, What it does mean is that you should be passionate and want the people around you that are passionate every single day. Simple concept. Sound like, hey, I can learn that anywhere. Will you do it? Attracting a world-class team. Hey, your company's not a charity. This isn't about bringing your friends together because I feel bad or I feel good or, hey, just we're friends with my ex-roommate. What can they contribute? How can you surround yourself with a world-class team? A couple of things will happen. If you do those first few steps right, validate your market, have a hot product like a Groupon, solve a real business world need, how are you going to bring those people together? They're going to come to you, and then your job is to select through them. And don't worry so much about, you'll find smart people, and I'm not diminishing intelligence. We've got probably the best engineers and smartest people, some of the smartest people in computer science in our company, and I mean that. And by the way, they're a product of this university. But at the end of the day, if they aren't coming in and they aren't motivated and they aren't contributing, I don't care how good they are, we'll replace them. So be flexible, prepared to improvise, adapt, and overcome. I talked about that. You'll make mistakes. Markets will shift. They're shifting, as Bill Gates would say, at the speed of business or at the speed of light today. You have to be able to improvise, adapt, and adjust to those things. I talked about being your own salesperson. If you can't sell it, geek, technologist, nobody else can. Eric Trone, our CTO and founder, while sometimes uncomfortable, has taught himself how to be a good communicator, principle we talked about earlier, how to be able to simplify technology so that people can understand it. He can have a conversation today with the CIO, or he can have a conversation with the deepest level kernel engineer, and people can respect and understand, and he can get that message across. We do not rely on our path, for me, for a sales team, to be able to win business and to grow this business. We do rely on our technologist. Steve Jobs will always, as long as he's at Apple, be the #1 salesperson. Bill Gates will always be the #1 salesperson. Just because you invented the technology, just because that's your passion and you prefer to do that on a daily basis and code back there, that's okay. I'm telling you, Eric codes on planes. I've got a VP of engineering. He codes at planes, at night, in the morning, all the time. But I can put any one of them in front of a CEO of Ford Motor Company, a CIO of Credit Suisse, and I'm telling you, they knock it out of the park every time. You've got to have that same capability. You've got to get past the thought, if you want to start your own company, that I'm not going to be the salesperson for my technology. Lesson 8, get as much money as you can. Again, technology people, ask for it with a good, solid market plan, a validation of that market. You'll be able to attract money. I will contend, even in this economy, that you can get venture capital money. I've worked with the best of them over the last 20 years. I've worked with the worst of them. I've worked with everybody in between. But there are people there that want to be convinced that they can invest their limited partners' money, Aunt Edna, the Massachusetts School Fund, the North Carolina Teachers Pension Union, and put that money to work and get those people return on investment, and they're counting on you. So you bring them that validated product, market, and technology, and they're going to listen to you. But you've got to be a good salesperson, a good communicator, and everything else that I talked about. Lesson 9, above all else, achieve the objective. I call this focusing on the wrong syllables sometimes. It's like the old adage, sometimes you're up to your butt in alligators and you forgot that the initial task was to drain the swamp. So we start focusing on the wrong things. And the biggest problem that companies do is they want to do too much. They want to do 10,000 things 10,000 times, rather than having the courage and the discipline to do 10 things 10,000 times. It's the repeatability. For those of you that took the marketing courses here at NC State, you know it's still about the marketing mix. It's the old adage from way back when. This is all about doing a repetitive nature. The more I touch somebody, the more I can evangelize my value proposition, the better I'm going to be. So what I do is I make sure everybody always keeps in the back of their mind, what is the objective, and have we progressed to achieving that objective today? Which leads me finally to the last lesson I learned, or maybe it's still one of the first lessons I learned, but last on my list, which is there really is only one difference that separates the successful from the unsuccessful and the entrepreneur from the wishapreneur. $100 to the person that can tell me what that is.
Take the first step.
Close, close, close. All good ones, but not the one reason why. And of course, this is my opinion. Sir, luck. We're going to talk afterward, you and I.
About the art.
About the art. Okay, yeah, you're kind of pulling all of my. It's only one thing. Who said execution? Close. I'm cheap. I don't have that money with. Not that I won't, but you're very close. The successful are willing to do what the unsuccessful are not. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Do you watch the Olympics? Anybody watch the Olympics? Right? Look at athletes. Athletes have this mentality. It makes no difference whether you're an athlete, you're a technologist, you're a CEO, you're a salesperson. You've got to say to yourself, am I really willing to do more today than my competitor? Am I willing to do more today than anybody else is to advance my cause? And the truth is, most of us don't do it. Most of us think we do it. We convince ourselves that we do it. But look at Apollo Ono in the interview. What he talks about, is anybody familiar with Colorado at all? Know the incline in Colorado? It is an old cog railway. I climbed that 6,000 foot or 9,000 foot vertical on this old cog railway, and I'll tell you, just walking up it is steep. At halfway, I wanted to quit. Apollo Ono goes up and down 3 times in a day on one leg. And when they interviewed him, he said, well, why do you do that? He said, because nobody else can, and if I do it, and I can successfully do that, that means I've done one more thing than my competitor, and I'll strengthen my legs in a way that my competitor isn't willing to do. So am I willing to get up and do that for 4 hours every day, switching legs, and then getting up even when I'm tired? Something good on TV, my girlfriend's calling me. What am I really willing to do? It applies to business as well. Am I really willing to get up, make one more phone call, call that one more prospect, make the call that's uncomfortable to the guy that I think will help me evangelize and validate my product? And a step further, if I think about this at 7:30 in the morning, am I willing to make the call at 7:30 in the morning? Or do I say to myself, oh, I'll get to that. It's a good idea, Mike. Take a personal note and do it later. Am I willing to do it right now? That's really what it's all about to me through all of the rest of this, is that you have access to, it's a level playing field. You've got the technology, you've got the smarts, you've got the passion, you've got the mechanics. You can read more about that anywhere. You can take courses on how do I build these businesses. But if you think about combining the art of it, being true to yourself, being true to the market, and at the end of the day, you're willing to do more than your competitors. You're willing to do more than your classmates. You will succeed. So with that, I'll leave you with those thoughts, and thank you very much for your attention.